For me, why was that sunrise surreal? I'm going to start with, I could see it. I could sit outside on my balcony. I could feel it. I could inhale and I could exhale all on my own. I could dress myself afterwards. I could see myself in the mirror to not put on makeup. I could get in the shower and actually shower and feel the hot water. I could dry my hair all by myself. I could care what I look like or not care. All surreal. And why? How many people here were born in Houston, Texas that are over the age of 50? Raise your hand. Right? Surreal. How many people remember when Katie was rice patties? Surreal. How many people remember when Sugarland was a sugar mill and nothing else? Literally, people rode horses. Yeah, all surreal. So each of us goes through life, and if we stop, not by choice, but sometimes because of surreal moments, we take a moment and we reflect. Recently, I had one of those surreal moments. I was in my bed and I couldn't move. I couldn't move. The pain was so great. And I had to text one of my children. Never easy for a 16-year-old human to text their child. And so my kids come and the ambulance takes me to the hospital, and sure enough, there I am, and I've got a cyst this big, grapefruit size, resting on my girly parts. Very surreal moment. You know what that can mean. It turns out it was all good. I'm fine, obviously, as fine as you can be at any given time. But I took a week off, and I actually made myself reflect on the word surreal. How surreal it is that I'm here. So I'm going to take you through this interweaving journey of how surreal life is if we choose to accept that which is right in front of us as purposeful and meaningful. I was born in Houston at the age of 6. I have a life circumstance where I'm literally sitting on my toilet in my little bedroom thinking to myself, if I'm ever a parent, I will never. Now, keep in mind, I become a parent, and I have a whole lot of more appreciation for what it's like to be my mother and my father. Have a pretty normal kidhood. I grew up in Meyerland, which is no longer. Very surreal when I drive through my neighborhood, and it doesn't exist because of decisions of politicians and legislators. Very surreal. And at about the age of 15 or 16, when we realized that I am an exceptional athlete and that my own home environment isn't necessarily the right environment for me for many reasons, I end up in a girls' boarding school. Surreal. Now let's remember, I grew up in Meyerland where everyone on my street is Jewish. I don't even know there's Gentiles in the world. Like, this is a concept for me. I know that there's kids in my middle school, but my dad's the baby of 8, so I don't have friends, I have cousins. So I end up at this boarding school where I am the only Jew. Surreal. But the learning in this boarding department from this new global economy that I'm in is shocking. Like, I have no idea that you can't go over the shower and take a picture of a Muslim girl showering because it's funny. No clue, because I'm 16, and how would I know? How would I know that? Because I'm not exposed. Somehow I make it out of my girls' boarding school, and my parents think it's a good idea, after locking me up, after exposing me to this wonderful experience for 3 years, They let me go to college in New Orleans. Now, I happen to have been born with the party gene. Oops. And my junior year at Tulane, I'm a tennis player and an early Title IX athlete. I'm in my car at 3 in the morning because, man, we were hungry. Just saying, woke up hungry. Oh, actually, we hadn't been to sleep, but we were hungry. And we'd been at a concert in Baton Rouge, and we drove back to campus. Oops, we made a stop at Popeyes at 3 in the morning. And a man got in the back seat of my car, and he put a gun at the back of my head, and he said, "Drive, I'm going to rape and kill you both," to me and my friend. I had taken a philosophy of the self class, and I had just read this book by Shirley MacLaine called Out on a Limb, and sure enough, I'm out on the limb. And I leave this situation, and I'm looking down at this car, and a voice comes in my head, and it says, "Go learn how to live in the moment." Great, get back in the car, go back to the dorm, do what you would do in college when you're freaked out with my friends, laughing. We thought it was hysterical. Never really thought about it again. I meet this guy, he says, "Marry me." I'm in graduate school at U of H, getting my master's in speech pathology because I didn't want to work at Foley's training program or be a teacher. Those were the two choices back in my genre of graduation dates. And I meet this guy and he says, "Marry me and move to Midland, Texas." And I said, "Okay, prove it's on the map." And he did, and he flew me out at night. And like they did back then, to all of the little oil ladies, they kept us drunk all day long. And they flew me back, and I'm like, cool, Midland, it's just like New Orleans. And then I ended up in Midland. 2 years into being in Midland, I give birth to my firstborn child. And it's everything. I mean, firstborn boy, it's everything. And at 10 months, he couldn't roll over in his crib. And as a speech pathologist who had helped found a school in West Texas for George W. Bush's best friend and those kids, I knew something was wrong. The school was a school for kids with profound differences, because I hate the word disabilities with a passion. And so I flew to Houston with my child to the Bluebird Clinic. Anyone ever heard of the Bluebird Clinic? And I went through 30 days of testing, and the physicians looked at me and said, "Ms. Selber, your child will have a fatal pneumatic reaction at about the age of 5. He has a myotonic dystrophy called Nimlin-Rod." And there I was, out on that limb, way out there this time, because I could see my father, the physician, assume his position, firing questions, and I saw my mother crumple over. And the voice in my head said, "Go learn how to love in the moment." Something deep in me said, this is BS. This is just not right. So I flew back to Midland, and I dropped out of life again. And I have a kind of big personality, so for me to drop out of life in Midland, Texas was noticeable. And I learned what it meant to literally love in the moment. And so my child went to Easter Seals with me every day, and we did physical therapy and aquatherapy and hydroponic therapy and therapies. And about 2 weeks before I was going to fly back to Houston for a checkup, I sat out on my porch in West Texas, and it was a surreal night. And for any of you who've ever been in West Texas, you know there's nothing there but stars. And it's surreal. And I looked up, and just like we're having this conversation, I said, "Okay, God, I'm Jewish, I don't know how to pray. I really don't even know what it means to have a relationship with you. But if there's one thing I know, the Jews have negotiated with you from day one, so I'm gonna cut a deal. You spare me this child's life, and I'll wake up every day and do all I can to make the world a better place." I flew back to Houston 2 weeks later to a false diagnosis. Surreal is cutting a deal that matters. How did that play out? I left my work at the Developmental Disability Center when my friend Chris's mother asked me to be at his bedside when he was passing. Chris was this amazing young man who communicated quite differently, but had these lights that spoke like you knew what he was saying. And his mom couldn't quite be there at the moment he passed and called me. And so I remember sitting with Chris and telling him, it's okay, you can go, you have served this everything. And I'll be danged if he didn't look up at me with these white lights and flash them at me, smile, and just went to sleep. And that's where I learned not to be afraid of death, and that there is so much death in life, but there's the most life in the moments of death. After being at the Developmental Disability Center, I decided that training was boring. Ever been to a training that was boring? It was not only boring, but it was not inclusive. The assumption in training, just like the assumption here, which is a terrible assumption, is that all of you can hear me at the exact same pitch and sound level. Anyone having a hard time hearing me? Good. Yes? So, thank you. I'm assuming all of you can see me, as trainings do. And I'm going to assume that you all understand my dialect. So we started creating trainings that were about team building, that were much more about how do we consciously include people without labels. I did that for about 8 years, and then my husband said, oh boy, now we're going to Oklahoma City. I still loved him. So I went across the Red River to Oklahoma City, which today is a much different city. And to make a very long story short about Oklahoma City, I ended up doing some contract work at the time for Planned Parenthood. And I saw the first case of AIDS in the entire state of Oklahoma. At the same time I saw that, my cousin got AIDS. And he went home to Shreveport, Louisiana, to be in his parents' home to die. And I saw what that looked like. And it didn't matter what your color was, your race was, your ethnicity was, any of those labels were. It was horrific. I saw the worst in humanity. I saw faith communities throw people to the streets. And yet, it was the best of humanity. I listed the house in Oklahoma City with a little note to my husband saying, I'm done with Oklahoma City, and you are welcome to join the children and I as we're going to move back to Houston, where we may all have a nice, rich future. 3 days later, the original owner of the house knocked on the door and bought the house. Surreal. The same day, I'm online. Back then, we did have online. We didn't have cell phones. And email was brand spanking new. Brand new. And I saw this little ad for the executive director of AIDS Foundation Houston. So I called my childhood friend Barry Mandel and I said, Barry, what do you know about this? He said, don't touch it. Nobody can help them. I was 38, cocky, young, magic words. No one. Yeah, pick me. I can do that. So I end up in this world where literally there have been, I think, 10 directors in 12 years. Like, even a full board of Aggies can't hire that many bad people, right? Sorry to the Aggies, but, you know. I end up there, and I remembered sort of that promise to get out of the way. Because here's what I knew. I didn't know anything I knew people were dying, and I knew that I had a gift and a talent, and that gift and talent was to go out there and stir the shit, and to make people uncomfortable, and to help people see the opportunities in each and every single time you have it, do the right thing. It's funny because to my right is Sarah Gish, who was one of those people that I stalked. You all think you know stalking in social media? That ain't stalking. Stalking is showing up at what was the Greenway Theater, knocking on someone's door, bursting into tears and saying, I need help. And without even skipping a beat, Sarah's there. Complete strangers. Never laid eyes on each other. And believe me, she's been through it. I've been through it. Being at AIDS Foundation Houston allowed me opportunities and networks of humans that I will forever, ever be grateful for. My healthy reminder of those days is my black book. Back then we used to have black books. My black book sits by my bed. And every Friday, I open my black book and I see all the people who did not wake up to see this sunrise this morning. These were my staff. These were my friends. These were people that no one cared about. But I remember every one of them. They were artists. They owned businesses. They were creatives. They all had surreal lives. I don't ever remember a time in my life where people were so bonded and so connected to do so much great work, including Sunday brunches at La Strada, where many of us had to get home in a cab because we cried hard and we laughed harder. And somewhere in this new world of social media, we have forgotten it is okay to hug. And we have forgotten that it's okay to make time and go spend it with strangers who become your lifeblood. I groomed my successor because I thought it was a really responsible thing to do, and he now runs Baylor International Pediatric AIDS Initiative. I left Dynegy. I left AIDS Foundation because I was recruited to go to a company called Dynegy. Dynegy was the company that tried to buy Enron. I was there for 2 years. I'll never, ever, ever forget when they offered me my package and told me I was going to get a BlackBerry. I was like, oh, cool, a gift card at Central Market. Many of you don't even know what a BlackBerry is, but a BlackBerry was the precursor to the phones that you all have today. And believe me, at AIDS Foundation Houston, we had no BlackBerries. We had landlines. We didn't even have those big box things in cars. Like, I really didn't know what a BlackBerry was. And I got really excited because I was going to be really able to do so much more because I ran this foundation and I was able to interface with HR and I was going to run a PAC. Oh my God, I saw it. I saw it. I saw the inside of pharma. I saw the inside of what it looks like to interface with the people that we elect and pay them to vote for what we needed. I saw people in elected positions saying, you're not showing me enough love. And they showed me this much love, meaning we're going to vote for their package and not your package unless you show, crazy stuff, surreal. Like, this is the United States of America. We're not corrupt. But I've been in this world of peace, love, and Bobby Sherman, and none of y'all know what that means either, but that's okay. I mean, we hugged at AIDS Foundation every day. We cried. And now I'm in corporate America where they're talking about the faggots in the elevator bank. And the greedy Jew with the, and I'm standing, and people are coming in my office going, do I come out at work? And I'm like, no, just get your job done and go home. I went from the height of love to being in the depths of, whoa, this is amazing. This is surreal. So in the words of a really good friend of mine who worked at Chevron, same kind of job that I was doing, on Monday through Friday, we rape and pillage, and on Saturday and Sunday, we plant the trees. I lived that. And in the night that we were in the boardroom announcing that we were going to buy Enron with Chuck Watson and Ken Lay, I looked at my friend and said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I don't know how or why this came out of me. I'm going to take 5 months, I'm going to pay off all of our community pledges, and then I'm going to walk into HR and I want a severance package, and nobody stop me. Please. Oh, you're crazy, Sarah, you're going to be a billionaire. I'm like, I did. 5 months and 3 weeks to the day, I paid off $5 million in community pledges by $10,000 checks in partnership with the C3s that we were working with. We didn't leave anyone with debt in the city. I walked into HR, I got my 6 months package, and I was out. 1 week later, nobody got a package. That's surreal. That's listening, really listening. I started my business, which is basically, we have a company that is really passionate about GSD. Who knows what GSD is? What is it?
Get shit done.
Yeah, get shit done. That's it, right there. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just knew I had 6 months, but I better figure it out. So I went to a friend of mine, and she whipped out a flip chart, and I went, oh, that sounds good. Project management team. Great, let's do that. And I went to my friend Linda Lim, who many of you may know, and she was like, oh, great, here's your business card. And I was in business, sitting at my desk going, because guess what? I had no more friends. I was no longer powerful. I wasn't giving out money. I wasn't on the cover of magazines anymore. I just wasn't all that anymore. Surreal. Surreal. All of the people that I had helped, and surreal. Not one person I knew referred anything to me, not one. And then one day the phone rang, and it's a third kind of party deal, and it's the NFL. Because Jack Kemp had been at the head of housing, and we had done housing with him. And my first project was with the NFL and Habitat International for Super Bowl 38. And we built 38 Habitat houses in 38 days. And the most surreal part of this was the chief communications officer at Dynegy was my first phone call to put her in business. Because she's the one who made me who I was when I was at AIDS Foundation. She saw me. I couldn't see me. She saw me. And whatever she said, I went, okay. And one day a guy at AIDS Foundation comes into my office and says, I've been fired by Chase. And I looked at him and went, no problem, we got you covered. And he leaves the office, and I go into my team, and I'm like, look, this guy just got fired at Chase. I told him to come back in 3 days. We'd have it figured out. And they looked at me and went, well, we don't have a clue. At which time I left the office and I did what I normally did. I went to Memorial Park and I was crying as I was running around like, oh my God, what did I tell this guy and what are we going to do? And I looked up and there's Marcy Kurtz. Anybody remember Marcy Kurtz? Marcy and I went to high school together. Hadn't seen each other since high school. I'm running around this track going, I need an attorney. I need an attorney. I look up, there's Marcy Kurtz running at me, stops and goes, Sarah, Marcy. Oh, Sarah, what do you do? Oh, I'm at AIDS Foundation. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm an attorney at Bracewell Patterson. Oh, Marcy, I need you. Surreal. Marcy comes to my house for Passover. 5 years later, I'm in her condo. I had bought the condo that Marcy Kurtz had lived in. And every day when I walk in my house, I am in the space of my high school friend who absolutely transformed legislation and how we legally were operating in the world of AIDS. Surreal, on a track, middle of the day, me in an ugly cry. Not that I'm an ugly non-cry, or maybe some days I am an ugly non-cry. Bawling, Marcy. Surreal. Just surreal. I've had this crazy, surreal life that has been about one thing and one thing only. Humans, humans, humans. It doesn't matter what my degree is. Nobody's asked me what my degree was in. No one's asked me if I had a master's or a doctorate. Recently, I was on a panel around diversity and inclusion. So let's play a game. How many people in this room have a disability? Raise your hand, per the ADA. Okay, I'm going to rephrase the question. Sorry, I'm moving. Sorry, I knocked everything off. How you doing? How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Can you see me?
I can see you.
A little bit? Do you need these?
Yeah, they help.
They help, right? Right? Is it a disability? How many people in this room learned differently than the way someone was trying to teach them? Raise your hand. Oh, guess what? How many of you were diagnosed for some kind of a difference? Right? So I'm going to put it this way. I'm 4 years old at the Little Red Schoolhouse, and I remember them doing this to me. Anybody remember this? Yeah, lefties. You weren't allowed to be that. So I had to learn to write right-handed. Guess how that transforms into my neurodiverse brain? I'm dyslexic. Anybody have a hard time getting somewhere? Like directions a problem? Raise your hand. Great. That's a form of dyslexia called topographia. That, according to the ADA, is a disability. Does anybody in this room care for someone with a disability? Keep in mind, according to the ADA, mental health and substance abuse is a disability. Does anyone here care for someone with a disability? Raise your hand. Great. Does anyone know somebody with a disability? Everybody, right? Okay, so help me understand, if everybody knows somebody with a disability, why do all these silos matter anymore? Silos, your color, your gender, who you sleep with, what your religion is. Let's go back to the magical moments of the most surreal of surreal moments, Harvey. Anybody out rescuing anybody? Raise your hand. Yeah, if you were rescuing, did you stop and say, "Excuse me, before I rescue you, who did you sleep with last night?" Oh, excuse me, before I rescue you, who do you pray to? No. No, and why is it only during those times are we consciously inclusive? Oh, because now we're doing training based on unconscious bias. Well, wait, if you're unconscious, how do you know you're biased? Of course we're diverse. How do we move the needle to something so surreal called conscious inclusion, where everyone has access to social and economic quality? Everyone. Social and economic quality. How many people here are an artist? Raise your hand. Yeah. How many people were told they were not an artist and bought it? Yeah. So I'm now an artist. And who taught me how to be an artist? The artists at Celebration Company. Celebration Company is a program in Houston that works with individuals with intellectual differences. They are developmentally different. And I went one day because they have a paint studio and they have a photography studio. And one of the artists said, "Oh, Sarah, sit down, come paint with me." And I said, "I'm not an artist." And Gabby said, without skipping a beat, "Sarah, everybody's an artist." Like, oh, okay. And so I sat down and I played with art. I'm an artist. I'm an amazing artist. And you can't tell me otherwise. Just like all of my friends at Celebration Company, every time I'm there, teach me something so new. Coming to Houston is a program called Real Abilities. Just go look for it. Do yourself a favor. Get in social media and look for REEL Abilities. If you want to think differently about this world of inclusion and how surreal it is that we are being so divided and so conquered, go to Real Abilities and learn about, ooh, wait, we all have it. We see someone in a wheelchair and our first assumption is, we see someone that's blind and we think. We see someone shaking with cerebral palsy and someone has a stroke. Someone has a traumatic brain injury. There are still humans there. But how many work in your workspace? How many people with autism, spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, minimal stroke, intellectually different, Down syndrome? Who's got them in their workplace? Raise your hand. Yeah, well, you're also at Celebration Company, right? It's just different. And as such, everybody should have access to social and conscious inclusion. So, last surreal is where we are. I got a call one day from a granite company, an honest granite company that knew that some of their granites had tested positive for radon and gamma radiation. And so they asked if we could create a nonprofit, a C3, an educational institution, to help people understand sick building syndrome. Sick building syndrome are all the chemicals and toxins that are in your home that you inhale daily. You can feel great about where you are because all of these mattresses being the worst of all the things you inhale, they have no chemicals. You're in a chemical-free space. That was the second time I had a death threat, was when we built this company, because the trade association got very angry when we were on the front page of the New York Times asking for people to test their granites. That's when I met New Living people. It was a long time ago. And surreal is knowing that there's people who are willing to engage in grace and pace and reject the world of greed and speed. Somehow, in a world of conscious inclusion, we have to consider how do we create access to social and economic equity. Economic equity means people have an ability to own a business. We're not going to call them small business. We're not going to box them into Small Business Tuesday. What is that? Thank you, American Express, for that nice pat on the head. No. We're going to invest in things like organic mattresses, which New Living is launching, Bungaloom, that is locally produced and affordable. Never been done. We're going to invest in companies like Joy to the Table, which that table has them, which is a woman who dropped out of corporate America and decided she wanted to bring more joy to all of our tables. It's a great business. It's manufacturing. Conscious inclusion is where you all come together and you say, no more chemicals. No, Houston is not going to become the great chemical factory of the world. We're not going to do that. We're going to become manufacturing. We're going to become filmmaking. We're going to become artists. And we're going to demand that our schools put the arts back in. That we're going to reject STEM, which is skimming the top 10%. And we're going to demand STEAM, science, technology, empathy, arts, and math. And then we will create a far more consciously inclusive region. So that's my surreal thought for the day. Sorry, I'm all over the board and all of that, but that's dyslexia.